Cougs house, Houston gets out-physicaled, outmanned, and ultimately outscored. Falls to West Virginia 45-35, and it wasn't even that ugly.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, live post-game edition of Locked On Coogs, following Houston's loss to West Virginia 35-45. I'm your host of Locked On Coogs, Parker Ainsworth. And I have to say, an emotional letdown this week. I think everyone could have seen coming. This potentially happening to this opponent was maybe not one that we saw. Today's was brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. We do have more on that fun in a minute, but moving the ball forward was something Houston shot themselves in the foot on time and time again today. I want to talk about kind of the emotional aspects of this game. I want to talk about lacking execution and some of that in the second segment. I want to talk about nightcaps and still trying to find some silver linings or whatever. Maybe we'll see how we're feeling when we get there. But honestly, part of me just wants to dump about this game. So we're going to turn the first segment talking about the emotional game that was, obviously, with the public knowledge now that Kurt Hester passed away last Saturday. You've seen the tributes from ESPN. College Game Day did something. Big Noon on Fox did something. People talked about it throughout the week. You also had the highs of the week of your first AP poll ranking since the fall of 22. That feels like it's not going to last much longer. You had, frankly, a bunch of awards rolling on in. The program felt like it still feels ahead of schedule, but felt much further ahead of schedule in the rebuild. Talk about recruits and this and that. Like, things were moving in that direction. And instead, the Houston Cougars seemed to come to a halt on Saturday. Now, opponent aside, I think most Houston Cougar fans saw an egg coming somewhere on the schedule. They had 4 opponents that they would be favored in each matchup. That's always rough. Again, the emotions of all the things we just listed, that adds up to being rough. These are college kids, and I do think that can take a toll sometimes. But I do think that, as I type one thing out, not to... I got like 74 text messages right now from the guy. Y'all need to leave me alone on this one. Just sit on it for a second. Houston falls and they fall flat on their face in a lot of ways. And I think all the emotion feels normal, right? I think it all feels like frustrations right now as fans feel normal. The guys are having, admittedly, I think, a very hard time swallowing the day to day. Just the public embarrassment of parts of it, the wanting to have done this for Coach Hester, parts of it that felt a little bit magical for the season as people went through. And then laying an egg when circumstance would just otherwise was on point. So Dizzy Busy points out here that earlier this week I said, and I'll say it again, previous iterations of the Houston football program, I feel like we assumed they would lay an egg. I think it was in the back of a lot of people's minds and ultimately came to fruition today. Houston had a lot on their plate, and everyone has a lot on plate at this time of the year. I don't mean to make excuses in that sense. I think that what's evident is Houston was unable to overcome it, right? In an explanational kind of way, Houston was unable to overcome the obstacles in front of them, including things like 4 turnovers. A Houston Cougar football program that has had, basically been not quite clean sheet free in their wins, but been very oppositional to turnovers throughout the season, was unable to do that. Literally dropping the ball at times. The punt return at the end hurt, but that's probably the most understandable of the 4. And even then, you want a louder, we would have said Peter or whatever, but to get away from the ball kind of a call. Not great. Now, other things that I think were important to note here was that we'll get the execution in the second segment, so that's more of the football side of this. But I do think at some point it felt like everyone was looking around for someone else to make a play, and against Arizona State or Arizona, that had been Connor Weigman. Let's just be honest, it had been Connor Weigman on the offense side of the football to make those plays in those spots. It could not be him today. And that's a problem, to say the least. I also think it's worth pointing out that while Dean Connors, I think, did a lot to help in other aspects, he wasn't enough. And honestly, he didn't have the holes in front of him that he needed to be enough. And that's part of it too. I don't think Dean Connors had a fumble he fell on. I was about to say, I don't think he made a mistake, but truthfully, he just made up for that one. Dean Connors had a really great day, but then like the moment he comes out, they miss an outside blitzer on a third down and give up a sack. They just can't give up. They just can't give up a sack there. And it's frankly his replacement while he's subbed out of the game because he's working his tail off and like running into crowds of people before that. Like these kinds of things happen over. Now, I see people talking about wet football and wet this and wet that, but the wet football thing to me was really only impactful to like one or two Houston Cougars. I didn't see a loss of control of the football to a whole bunch of other people. I will say that, the thumbnail in Tyler's episode is lost control because it felt like Houston did steer out of control at different points in this football game, both literally losing the ball, flipping it backwards as you're trying to throw it forward, but also in just like unable to control and the emotional roller coaster that was the week. And I don't mean to say that as an excuse. I say that like the thing this program has to be able to do to take that next step forward is going to be to get through that and rise above that and get over that. Now, I think, frankly, part of the reason we were so high on them throughout the week is because they did a week ago, right? They found out about Kurt Hester's passing earlier in the day before playing Arizona State last week and rose above it and won that football game. This week we didn't, and so that's the way that one goes. Handful of emotional comments today. We're in the emotional portion of the 3 bullet points on the side. Out-coached. I'll talk about that in the second segment. I don't think it's quite as bad as people point out, but fair. Surprise, Houston wasn't ready to play today. I think that's the thing, is some of us are unfortunately not super surprised. Some of us are more surprised than others. Pathetic, inexcusable loss. I think it's one of the reasons this one's hurts. Alfred, frustration with one turn was because of the wet football, put two hands on the ball. Maybe, again, the wet football was only impactful to a handful of people. Take 7-2 ahead of where we thought we needed to be, but today's losses on the coaches outplayed. We can talk about how coaches play in execution in the second segment, I guess. Maybe I need to save that comment for later. All kinds of people flipping up here. We lost turnover battle, line of scrimmage battles. West Virginia beat our tails in trenches. We're rushing 5 to prevent Weigman from rushing. I thought they looked like they had a pretty game plan for that. And we can talk about blueprints throughout the week as we get into a second and third watch and all that. And I did save the game on the DVR to watch again. I'm going to have trouble swallowing that one as we watch again. It's not going to be as fun to watch as some of the other ones have been to watch a second time. But I want to talk about execution because a lot of people are talking about coaching and this and that and more the X's and O's kinds of things of this one. And I don't think that was entirely the problem. We'll talk about it in a second. But first, today's show is brought to you by everybody's over at Mazda, moving the game forward, because some people believe it's not just about playing the game. So redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, culture, and keep the game moving forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, I had a whole thing ready for like Amare Thomas's couple big touchdown catches that at the time felt like they were going to push this thing back in Houston's direction. Just ultimately could not get that done. But when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every big highlight, there's more to Mazda vehicles. Mazda, move and be moved. Park Rangers, Locked On Coogs here. And I want to talk about the lack of execution in this one, because I think a lot of people, both in the comment section here, you got Front 7 humbled, we got Supporting Football Friends exhausting, we've got Credit West Virginia, we've got different things about here. National Cougar Football, National Relevant Cougar Football, the Cougars blow out a rumor started they did in this channel with Coach Lee, pick your poison, Central last 30 years. I actually felt like I was trying to say that that's not going to happen, but that's fine. You can only listen when you want to listen, I guess. Hit subscribe, though. Hit subscribe. I point out here that a lot of people went to execution and play calling and didn't, I don't think, appropriately assign that. On West Virginia's final touchdown, Houston hit the ball carrier in the backfield 3 times. In their second to last touchdown, when Scotty Fox breaks off the 34-yard touchdown run, Houston's got defensive players pointing at each other about who's supposed to be standing where. And you have other moments in the game when you can't hold on to the football because it slips out of your hand as you go backwards. You have missed blocks on the edge, give up sacks. I don't mean to say that isn't in some part coaching too, because you do have to practice and be better at those things and teach those things and all of that. But I say lack of execution to say that, like, there's only so much thing at some point, the player in the backfield that has the guy wrapped up has to get him on the ground. And at some point, the guy that's supposed to throw the football has to hold on to the ball and then throw it. And at some point, the guy that's supposed to make the block is supposed to make the block. And I think that all of that ties into a number of different things that just did not happen. And so I can't figure out how to say nicely, but sometimes players have to step up and make plays in those moments. They've got to rise to the occasion, and when the tackle is in front of them, make it. When the play is in front of them, make it. And unfortunately, that just did not happen. And you can't sit here and, I mean, are there play calls I would have made differently? Yeah, no, sure, absolutely, right. You're letting me know of yours. I gotta say though that at some point, you also need to catch the ball here, hold on to the ball there, make the block there, make the tackle there, right, and all of those kinds of things. Now, on the whole, I should say, through 9 games, you're 7-2, and I think that there's a good chance that you're more of the 7-win football team than the 2-loss football team. You got embarrassed today on national television to a team you should have beat, but this is kind of the only one of those games. I mean, Tech, you blew it. You got blown out a little bit in that Tech game, but honestly, they were in the top 10 right after that. Everyone else you've played, you found ways to win and done the right things. You're back on the football field next week. The way the execution can hurt you long term is if those things start to linger, right? If those things start to stick around and make big impacts in that kind of way. And so I think that's honestly where I'm going to sit on this one, is that, like, just got to flush that game. There's not a whole lot of positive pull out of that one. It was all sitting in front of you. And you got to win that football game. All right. I will say that ultimately I need to move on to the third segment. I need to get off this and trying to be positive for a second, I want to point out that Amare Thomas in the nightcaps portion of the show here. Nightcap portion of the show. Tip your cap to whoever you want to. I guess first tip the cap to West Virginia for out physicaling Houston at the point of attack time and time again, and for executing in their own right, and for moving into things like that. They need to be given credit where it's due. Eddie Walls, I thought, for all the flack the defense is going to get after this week, had a pretty strong game, both in the run and pass, had 13 total tackles coming off a defensive player of the week kind of week last week in the Big 12. I thought Kobe Young looked like he needs to get the ball more. Great catches, great block, frankly, on the little rub route that they ran. Thought Dean Connors looked like a man possessed. 71 rushing yards doesn't really tell the story about how difficult those were. Even his receiving yards, his receptions were tough. So shouts to Dean Connors on that one. Then Amare Thomas had 2 different touchdown catches that I think probably could both be on SportsCenter. With the loss, I don't know that I want to see that game anymore on Sport. I'm going to watch it again. I'm kidding. But that's going to sit on that. I'm going to get out of here. I'm spiraling a little bit. Yeah, no, Houston blew it, and Houston blew it, beat themselves, 4 turnovers, bunch of penalty yards, just couldn't get it done. And we'll be back at it Monday morning, because of course we are. And we're breaking things down each and every day here at Locked On Coogs. Subscribe to the Bell Anywhere Live. Locked On Coogs, primary Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs, even on the hard days.